Hello and welcome to EFD, where today we're looking at 10 players who came to define their position on the field. 10. Arjen Robben. Over the last 20 years, football has moved away from the tall, target man type of striker, with nimble attackers like David Villa and Sergio Aguero dominating across Europe. This meant wingers needed to cross less and score more, so managers started playing left-footers on the right and vice versa, to add a goal threat from wide. And no one embraced this more successfully than Arjen Robben. Aside from the Cruyff turn, there may be no move more iconic than the Bayern man's cut-in from the right. As a result, Robben is arguably the most predictable player in world football, yet he remains virtually impossible to stop. He's been involved in 68 goals in his last 90 Bundesliga matches and has reached double figures in 9 different seasons, while Luis Figo only did it 6 times and Ryan Giggs 5. Robben set the blueprint for Cristiano Ronaldo and Gareth Bale and remains a nightmare for defenders at 33 years old. When he retires, every left-back in the world will no doubt celebrate. 9 and 8. Carlos Vellante and Claude Makelele. Only 2 players we can think of have had a position named after them. Carlos Vellante was an Argentinian footballer in the 1930s who played for Napoli, Rennes and Flamengo, though never winning a domestic title. A tough and hard-working defensive midfielder, he did pick up 3 regional championships with the Mengao, and his name, which coincidentally meant something like steering wheel, became the name for his position, the organiser in front of the back 4. Though twice capped by his national team, Vellante felt more affinity with his adopted country of Brazil, even joined the Seleção as a physio and masseur at the 1938 World Cup. More than 60 years on, English football was lagging behind the rest of Europe tactically. The Premier League was still a 4-4-2 division, and midfielders played in a flat line regardless of their role. Into this mess came Claude Makelele, the French dynamo who had won league titles with Nantes and Real Madrid, as well as the Champions League. Though just 5'6", Makelele's impeccable positional sense and football brain provided the platform for Zidane, Figo and other Galacticos to attack, knowing they had a brick wall behind them. But Florentino Perez was obsessed with star power, and he refused to give a pay rise to an unglamorous defensive player. Makelele left for Chelsea and Perez smugly ignored the objections of Zinedine Zidane, saying Makelele's technique is average, he lacks the speed and skill to take the ball past opponents, and 90% of his distribution either goes backwards or sideways. Ouch. It was probably his biggest mistake ever. Real went 4 years without winning a single trophy, despite having the most expensive squad in history, while Makelele won back-to-back titles with Chelsea, with the Blues conceding just 37 goals across 2 whole Premier League seasons. However, Makelele wasn't just a tough tackler, but the hub of Mourinho's team, setting the attack in motion with careful passing, and he could even escape pressure on the dribble. His 5 years at Chelsea were instrumental in turning the club into a European giant, and his position is still called the Makelele role today. 7. George Weah. These days, the goal poacher might be a dying breed, but they were once dominant in world football. Hugo Sanchez, Gerd Müller and Gary Lineker had rarely left the penalty area, but in the late 80s and early 90s, players like George Weah and the Brazilian Ronaldo changed what was expected of a striker. Both were fast, strong, lethal finishers, but they could also drop deep and dribble, find space in wide positions and create for teammates. Forwards didn't have to be a target man anymore, and players like Thierry Henry flourished in their freer role. The Frenchman racked up 20 assists as well as 24 goals in the 2004 Premier League, as Wenger allowed him to go where he wanted in the final third. No player has reached that tally since. While conventional attackers like Paolo Rossi and Van Basten won the Ballon d'Or in the 1980s, football now prizes wide attackers more, as you can tell by the fact that an out-and-out centre-forward hasn't won the award since Andriy Shevchenko in 2004. That's partly thanks to Mr. George. 6. Giacinto Facchetti. These days, every fullback is expected to be able to defend and attack, but it wasn't always that way, and fullbacks didn't even always exist. Before the 1950s, teams commonly played with 3 at the back and fielded 4 strikers, hence the insane scoring records you see from early football. But as fitness levels improved, managers like Brazilian national coach Flavio Costa were able to employ a 4-2-4 formation, asking fullbacks to help out in midfield. By the 1960s, Italy had embraced this new philosophy, with Inter's Giacinto Fischetti the outstanding example. A one-club man, Fischetti was a right-footed left-back, 6'3", incredibly fast and often leading the side's counter-attack. He even scored 12 goals in one campaign in 1966. The most the legendary Roberto Carlos ever managed was 9. Fischetti would go on to win 4 titles and 2 European Cups and score 75 goals in his career, more than Sergio Ramos has so far. He even came second for the 1965 Ballon d'Or, ahead of Bobby Charlton and Ferenc Puskás. Meanwhile, Brazil won the 1970 World Cup, with fullback Carlos Alberto scoring the tournament's most famous goal. 4 at the back would dominate global football for the next 50 years. 5. Lev Yashin. Did you think Manuel Neuer was the first sweeper keeper? Well, Lev Yashin disagrees. Neuer may be one of just 3 keepers to be nominated for the Ballon d'Or, but the Soviet stopper is the only man in his position to actually win the award, topping Eusebio and Jimmy Greaves in 1963. But Yashin wasn't just exceptional with his hands. The keeper, who spent his whole career with Dynamo Moscow, winning 5 titles as well as Euro 1960 with the Soviet Union, would venture out of his box, tackling forwards and acting as an extra man in possession. He was so good on the ball that Inter's famous attacking midfielder Sandro Mazzola said, "Yashin plays football better than me." On his debut, Yashin let in a goal kick from the opposition keeper, but he ended up keeping 270 clean sheets in his career and saving 150 penalties. When asked for his secret, he said, "The trick is to smoke a cigarette to calm your nerves and then take a big swig of strong liquor to tone your muscles." No wonder he was so fearless leaving his area. 4. Nandor Hidečkuti. The story of the false 9 is full of false truths. Sometimes it's claimed that Uruguay fielded Peregrino Anselmo in the position at the first World Cup in 1930, while others say the iconic Matthias Sindelar made the role his own in the Austrian Wunder team of that same decade. But the definitive interpretation of the role came from Nandor Hidečkuti, the genius who ran the Hungarian national team in the 1940s and 50s. Hidečkuti was not fast or powerful like Kokshić or Puskás, but the attacker wearing the number 9 shirt would drop into the midfield and even the defence, then use his long passing and skillful interplay to pull apart the opposition. Back then, everybody man-marked, so Hidečkuti's movement left defenders bewildered, unsure whether they should follow him downfield. And despite his selfless play, the Hungarians scored 265 goals in 381 club games, a better rate than Ruud van Nistelrooy and Luis Suarez. 3. Arsene Wenger. Once upon a time, Arsene Wenger was the most revolutionary coach in the English game. The Frenchman was hired by Arsenal from the Japanese league, where he had failed to win the title and when his career win percentage was just 45%. When Wenger turned up in London, Lee Dixon thought he was a geography teacher. But the former Monaco manager didn't care one bit. He changed the menu at the training ground, feeding the players vegetables and lean meat instead of chips and curries. Alcohol was also restricted, a tall order in a squad which counted 2 alcoholics, Tony Adams and Paul Merson, among its stars. Wenger went on to push for a new £12 million training complex, reportedly even choosing the knives and forks in the cafeteria. As a result, Premier League managers couldn't simply focus on tactics anymore, but also diet, fitness, and every aspect of the team's preparation. Wenger had brought the future with him from Japan. It's just sad that he stayed at Arsenal long enough to become the villain. 2. Roberto Baggio. We all know the Italian terms regista and trequartista, the deep-lying playmaker and number 10 respectively. But there is another word reserved for the special footballer, the one that you want on the back of your shirt, who does the things you cannot explain, the fantasista. And Roberto Baggio was the perfect fantasista. A brilliant creator and dribbler, he could finish too, bagging more than 20 goals in a season on 6 occasions, something Wayne Rooney and Didier Drogba could only do 4 times. He won the Ballon d'Or, and by taking up a position in the hole behind the strikers, he repopularised the number 10 role. In the 1990s, most teams didn't use an advanced playmaker, and Alex Ferguson reportedly turned down the chance to sign Zidane at Bordeaux because he didn't know where to play the Frenchman. Baggio changed all of that, and the likes of Zidane, Rui Costa and later Ozil all benefited. Roberto himself became the first player to reach 200 Serie A goals in nearly 30 years and remains in the top 7 scorers in the league's history, above Del Piero, Batistuta and Inzaghi. 1. Franz Beckenbauer. Now regarded as maybe the greatest defender ever, Franz Beckenbauer started in the midfield, spending 2 years with Bayern before they were promoted to the Bundesliga. In his second campaign, he hit 17 goals in 37 games and went on to score over 100 for club and country, more than Andrea Pirlo and Luka Modric. Under 6 feet tall, Beckenbauer was no physical powerhouse, but his intelligence helped Bayern and West Germany overrun opponents. Technically playing as a sweeper, Kaiser Franz would cover for fullbacks and drop into the box to mark attackers, but also could bomb forward on the attack, pointing where he wanted his teammates to run. He had been inspired by Giacinto Fischetti, and his relentless energy allowed him to be a ball-playing defender, a midfield distributor, and a second striker, all in one. Twice a Ballon d'Or winner, Zidane and Ronaldinho could only manage it once. Beckenbauer's free movement was the German response to Dutch total football. Always thinking deeply about the game, he became a manager after retirement, winning league titles with Bayern and Marseille and another World Cup with his country. What a legend. So that was our top 10 players who redefined their position. But what did you make of it? Are there any legends we've missed out? Let us know in the comments below. Now, if you've enjoyed this, why not check out Stat Wars and Continental Club? And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe.